Good afternoon, everyone. Can I ask that you take your seats so we can begin with a wonderful afternoon of programming? How was lunch?
Delicious.
Thanks to all of our volunteers and generous donors for that beautiful plant-based meal. I now have the privilege to introduce a man who's inspired me for many years and inspired many people in this room, who's been a leader around organics, around regeneratives, around GMOs. He's actually the first person that I ever heard use the term GMO. I now hand it over to Mark Squire to lead a panel with brilliant experts, but we're going to do something a little bit different with this panel. You might notice that on all of your tables there are pieces of paper and pens. We ask that when those questions percolate in your minds, you write them down, and I'll be coming around in about a half an hour to collect them so that we can have 15 minutes of Q&A with these experts. Does everyone see those on their tables? Yeah? All right, fantastic. Mark, take it away. Thank you.
Thanks, Erin. Yeah, I started to, one of the other hats that I wear in the world is that I'm on the board of the Non-GMO Project. And in that capacity, we started to get a little bit of a handle or understanding about some of these new emerging technologies that are actually kind of in our face right now, and the complexity of them. And the when you start to examine the political implications, the worldwide farming implications, the more I learned about it, the more shocked I got. And I'm always one to try and be thinking ahead. You know, I think that the corporate interests that have screwed up agriculture in this country are always thinking 10 years ahead of the curve. So I think we have to be doing that too, and absolutely understanding some of these things that are coming down the pike at an amazingly fast pace. And so, you know, we do refer to some of these concepts as, you know, synthetic biology, Crispr. They're all these different technologies that they're all GMO technologies. And in fact, I think, you know, I know Stacy especially will talk a little bit about the languaging of it. But, you know, I think that there's a real concerted effort to try and language it as other than GMOs, because they know that they've lost on that battle, and you know, they would like it to be gene editing instead, and you know, these new, you know, sexy terms. So in the capacity of looking from the Non-GMO Project's point of view, trying to figure out how to monitor all these things that are coming out, you know, we started to just do monitoring of exactly how many there are. And you know, I want to tell you that it's astonishing how many are already on the market with very, very little thought to the implications. There's, you know, there is no research behind them. They're being eaten every day right now. You know, there's everything from mushrooms that don't go brown to apples that don't get brown. There are this Impossible Burger, which is a synthetic biology version of hemoglobin that is supposed to taste like meat. I've never tasted one, but I know Michael Hansen is anxious to tell you that story, which is shocking. Just at the lack of thought and regulation that surrounds it. And that's just the consumer aspect. When you start to look at some of these technologies from the worldwide farming aspect, which really is about what this conference is about, I think it's equally shocking. You know, I think that humanity almost has this choice of do we go with this moneyed vision of agriculture that's we virtually, you know, they're looking at virtually eliminating farmers. You know, farmers are kind of too messy. When there's a hurricane in Haiti and the vetiver crop is destroyed, that's a problem for these companies. They would rather be producing the vetiver in a vat somewhere in California. And the real problem with that whole model is that they got to feed the bacteria that are spitting out this chemical something, and what that looks like generally is intensively raised sugar cane. It's monocrops that are feeding this machine. So it's an absolutely insane model that they're trying to shove down our throats. And I guarantee you there's probably even today, there's conferences around the Bay Area where you go in them and it's like, this is the future. This is where all the money is going. We in the Bay Area are the absolute epicenter of this movement. And they really have this vision of revolutionizing agriculture on us, and it's quite shocking. So I always feel a little bit like I'm giving a lot of bad news to people, and sorry, I feel like it's important for us to understand this is what we're up against. And I don't think any of us really have that much solutions here. But hopefully with all the other solutions we're hearing about climate change, it will fit into that. Yeah, one of the things I wanted to just mention too is like in preparation for this talk, I just went online and looked at some of their websites, and I was even shocked. Like, this one company, Amyris, which they're not, my understanding is that they're not really making products. What they're doing is they're licensing the technology to companies. So, if you wanted a bacteria that would spit out some obscure chemical, you could go to Amyris and basically say, this is what I want, and they would make you, through synthetic biology, a bacteria that you could then buy from them and cultivate for yourselves. And that's the world that we live in. One of the things that I found out on their website is that they're actually, proud of the fact that they're working hand in hand with DARPA, which is the Defense Department's research arm. So this is our military that is researching these things too. So if you want to get scared. So with that, I think I'll introduce our first speaker. He was one of those people that, I was involved in the ban in Marin County for GMOs, 12 years ago, and I remember Ignacio was one of the people out there that we called on to come and help, and he was so generous with his time, and as always. Ignacio Chapela is a microbial ecologist and mycologist at the UC Berkeley, and he's perhaps best known for the fact that in 2001, he and his team produced a paper that documented about the transgenic contamination that was happening in Mexico. And this is the part of Mexico where corn originated. So the fact that there was actually GMOs being discovered in those crops was quite shocking, and it created quite a stir in the world. And because he had really the courage to question the GMO machine or economic machine, and specifically when it had to do with UC Berkeley and them being, all this money being thrown at them, and he spoke up about that compromising the integrity of the university, and at that point they actually tried to take his tenure away, and he had to go to court to fight that. Fortunately, the courts worked, and he's still at UC Berkeley teaching. So I kind of wanted to just open it up and, maybe start out asking Ignacio just to, maybe give us a little bit of the history of I think the synthetic biology thing really began right here, and I thought maybe he could share with us a little bit of that and the farming implications. Thank you.
Great to be here. Thank you. I'm sorry I cannot see your faces. That is a little bit troubling, but I'm still here. I'm old. I didn't used to be but now I am, and I'm. It's a happy thing to be, in many ways. One of the benefits of age is that you get to tell stories. You get to tell stories based on what happened, rather than be in that childlike stage where you are just imagining what the world might be, could be, will be, and so on, with all kinds of emotions that are interesting too. But the emotion of having a historical background to draw from is one that we really should promote. And so I come to you from that perspective, because whether I want it or not, I am someone who from about age 14 has been really dedicated, out of passion really, to trying to understand the world of the living. And whether I want it or not, that quest in my life really matched the development of this thing that we are today talking about as biotechnology, with all kinds of different names. So I am a little bit of an ethnographic item for you here, and I'm also happy for that, because I feel like I have the history of biotechnology in my own personal and professional history. And that's where I'm coming from. We are supposed to be talking today about emergent technologies. We are apparently supposed to be talking about synthetic biology. Some people are very, very concerned and excited in both positive and negative ways about something that people are calling gene editing or genetic editing. In this genetic editing, we're echoing something that happened in 2000, just a little bit of history, how Bill Clinton and what was his name, Prime Minister of the UK? Tony Blair. Together, Tony Blair through satellite and Bill Clinton holding hands with Craig Venter and the public representative of the Human Genome Project, and they announced that we had finally cracked the code of God, the code of nature, and the book of God, I think, is the formulation, that we now can read the book, and now it's time to start editing. This is Craig Venter's idea that we left the past behind and now we can join. There's a lot of religious people who feel that this is a very religious quest, that what we're doing is we're joining the creation effort, that we're this special being on the planet that is helping God with the last stages of creation and so on. Many things have come up from this quest that is about 40 years in the making, in the actual physical making. First genetic engineering organism, 1972. First release, the late 70s, early 80s, out of Berkeley, Steve Lindau, the Ice minus bacterium, here in California, here in the Bay Area, here in the heart of the Bay Area at Berkeley. So we have a long history. Many things have come out of it, most of it hot air. I think one of the best things, from their point of view, one of the best things that they finally came up with is a term that is not synthetic biology, that is not genetic editing. It is called new gen technologies or new gen biotechnology. This is a really smart and useful term. It's a really great invention, if we want to talk about inventions. It's an invention that will allow them to hide behind the future the way they've been doing for 40 years without having to prove any product. Next generation will allow them to say, well, we got it wrong the last time, which is what the so-called gene editors are saying now. We got it wrong last time. It's true that genetically engineered crops really didn't work the way we wanted. It's true that we didn't produce all the promises that we made in the 70s, 80s, and 90s have never come to fruition. We've been talking about them, but we haven't produced them. It's really true, but that's because it's in the past. Now we have a new generation of so-called technologies that are going to make that possible. So I think the biggest discovery, the biggest invention here is this term. It is a semantic intervention rather than a biological one. Why is a semantic intervention necessary? You know, cell phone people who produce the nuclear bomb, also out of Berkeley, they don't need to come up with this kind of idea, this kind of pushing things forward into the future unnecessarily, because cell phones work. The nuclear bomb worked, whether you like it or not. But genetic engineering did not work. It did not produce what they were promising would produce. The actual products didn't happen. I don't have time to go through the numbers. What I'm trying to just put out there for you is little pointers to grab from in history, to start, I think, turning around the way things are presented by even very good newspapers like the New York Times, for example, and trying to reconceptualize what it is that we're really talking about. So it is, it has been a long time, and they have not really produced what they promised they would. 2 products, 4 crops, 5 countries account for 98% of the acreage of GMO crops, and that continues to be the one place where they have had some success for many different reasons, not least political, not least the support of the US federal government that we all know about. Example of Amiris, another company that Mark brought up. They continue to be alive for some kind of miraculous reason. This is a company that came up out of Berkeley. We subsidized it tremendously to the point that we put in a building up for them to meet with BP at the time when BP and Chevron were fooled into, I believe, believing that now the problem of producing fuels was going to be resolved through so-called synthetic biology. I'm talking about 10, 15 years ago. And now Amiris, I hear from Mark, has no products. They sell a no-product. They got the US Navy to say they would buy all the biofuels they could produce. They had plants in Brazil, big accidents there, big problems there, but they never really produced anything that was competitive. They moved, then after that, they moved into the perfume industry. They figured out that it was easier to sell their so-called products by the milligram rather than by the ton, which is really a no-brainer. But in the end, the quest for biofuels that was just so hyped, not too long ago, 10 years ago, even some people today continue to believe that we're going to produce biofuels from algae and from all kinds of different organisms that are genetically engineered, genetically edited, and so on, hasn't come to fruition and will never come to fruition. The reason why, I'm just very worried about time, so I'm sorry if I'm being telegraphic here. The reason why is because the great, big, and really very expensive edifice of genetic engineering, which includes CRISPR and talents and zinc fingers and all these other things that you keep hearing as a new generation of biotechnologies. The great edifice of biotechnology is founded on really muddy foundations, foundations of sand that really do not exist. The foundation of genetic engineering, including CRISPR, including talents, including all the synthetic biologies that you've heard about, the foundation of that biotechnology is something called the Central Dogma. The Central Dogma, very briefly put, tells us and teaches our children to believe in the idea that you can pull out a chemical out of a living form, a reproducing organism, and pull that piece of DNA, stick it into another life form, and get a so-called trait, a behavior, a part, that will make that other organism, the recipient, behave like the first organism. I always like to use my preferred goal for biotechnology, which is to have flying pigs. I would like to have flying pigs. If you could find the gene, so-called, the piece of DNA that so-called codes for wings in the swan, and move it into the pig, then you could have flying pigs. This is the idea behind the Central Dogma of molecular biology, the Central Dogma of biology, the Central Dogma it is called. And we continue to teach it to our little children In all the science museums, you will see the Central Dogma centrally and dogmatically presented to all of us. We teach it also to our genetics students at Cal, at Stanford, at Harvard, and I've been checking on courses on genetics that are online, and we still today, the first few weeks of genetics are involved in an indoctrination into the Central Dogma. That includes not questioning it. So if you believe in the Central Dogma, you believe in the foundation of biotechnology, and then you can start getting into all these discussions, all these confusions, build up, and you can help build that castle. Sometimes by criticizing and attacking it on its own terms and saying, oh my gosh, I really should be concerned because you're telling me you're going to produce flying pigs, and I would not like to receive pig manure on my head. By doing that, I'm forgetting that I'm just, wow, is that appropriate? BSing you with bull. Oh. I'm finishing now. You forget to question that what I'm using to scare you or to give me money, for example, as venture capital money, is supported by a sandy, muddy, faulty foundation, the Central Dogma. So if there is one pointer that I want to leave you with is question the Central Dogma. Secondly, remember, do not buy the next gen idea. We've given them enough time, enough money. It's time to look at different ways of dealing with the world. Thank you.
Thanks, Ignacio. So, you know, our next speaker is Stacy Malkan, and I think she'll kind of explain to us, I hope, why we keep buying this BS, and or the American people do, not you guys. So Stacy is the author of an award-winning book, Not Just a Pretty Face, The Ugly Side of the Beauty Industry, which is, you know, so she's been involved in a campaign for safe cosmetics, a coalition of nonprofit and health environmental groups that's helped to shift the beauty industry away from harmful chemicals. Stacy has been named one of the 5 visionary leading the charge to better health by Experience Life magazine, and one of 7 powerful women in the natural beauty industry by New Hope 360. She's appeared on numerous movies, including The Human Experiment, produced by Sean Penn. I first got to know Stacy in 2012 when she was the media director for Prop 37, the labeling campaign that, you know, really we only lost by 1.5 points there. So, you know, not only did it come quite close, but it also started a real revolution across the country of awareness about GMO issues. So now Stacy runs the U.S. Right to Know campaign, which has been doing a lot of the really, you know, hard-hitting investigation into what has been happening to grab our media away from us and tell all these lies about it. So with that, she'll tell you her story. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, and everyone. I'm so thrilled to share the panel with both of you. Brilliant, all of you brilliant people, and to be here with so many. I've heard today just so many inspiring stories of hope and heart, and I feel so much better than I did yesterday. I do a lot of work kind of isolated and looking at the ugly side of the food industry, I'll say. I wanted to start out actually with talking about an article that was recently in the Los Angeles Times by Mike Hiltzik. He's a columnist, not very much a friend to GMO labeling campaigns, but he wrote a great piece interviewing Jennifer Doudna, and she is the inventor of Crispr in Berkeley. And the headline of this piece is "Crispr Pioneer Jennifer Doudna Struggles with the Ethical Implications of What She Has Wrought." And she has a new book out. It's called A Crack in Creation, Gene Editing and the Unthinkable Power to Control Evolution. And it opens with the stark observation that the revolution in gene editing launched by Crispr offers both the greatest promise and arguably the greatest peril for the future of humanity. And then he explains that what sets CRISPR, and that's what's often referred to as gene editing or sometimes sold as super precise. I'm sure Michael will talk a little bit more about how that is not true, but it's basically snipping and changing a gene, allowing genetic engineering to happen much faster. And another difference is that is the ease with which it allows users to alter DNA not only in the somatic cells but the germ cells, which can be passed on to future generations. So changes to those cells can become part of evolutionary legacies. So obviously those changes need to be very carefully considered, for once scientists embark down that road, there may be no turning back. So that's in the story, and then he explains that this knowledge has been keeping Jennifer up at night, and she tells the story in the book of a dream she had in 2014 when CRISPR first became widely distributed. She was jolted by a dream in which she was brought to see Adolf Hitler, who asked for a description of the uses and implications of this amazing technology. She lay awake pondering how CRISPR's truly incredible power could be devastating if it fell into the wrong hands. And so she talks about the technology with great hope, but also that humbleness of knowing what happens if it falls into the wrong hands. And so we need to be considering, when we think about these new technologies, the new faster, better, supposedly easier ways to change genetics, what context is it happening within? So I wanted to talk about context today and think about genetic engineering always in context. And so changing a gene, of course, is not just a simple one change. It's happening within an ecosystem, so any changes to a gene can and does often have off-target effects. It's also happening, genetic engineering, while it could be used for good or bad, it's happening in a context of politics and a context of economics, in a system that is itself toxic and unhealthy. So my own personal context in this is that I'm a mom and a consumer. I buy most of the food for my family. I want to know what's in the food I'm buying. I want to know how it's produced. And that was what Proposition 37, the GMO Labeling Initiative in California, was about. And thank you to all of us in this room who worked on it, all of you, many, many, many passionate activists were in that fight. And what a fight it was. I was the media director, so I really saw firsthand, what Monsanto and the other chemical companies, the junk food companies, brought to that fight. And it really could only be described as a full court press of deception, denial, ugliness, and dirty tricks. It all unrolled, for those of you here, pretty much over a very difficult 37 days, starting October 1st up till the election, where they were spending basically $1 million a day carpet bombing California with messages of deception. And from there, it did work, unfortunately. Although important to remember that we did, as Mark said, we almost won it. We came so close. We did win on election day, and we did come out. I think this is a really important lesson from Prop 37 with a positive, hopeful, loving message at the end. The ad that the campaign ran was called "Food is Love," and it was about that idea of women and moms and all of us, parents and families, showing love through the food that we eat and share with each other. And that's something that motivates people and people believe in, and is something that is changing drastically the food system from the consumer side. So I think that's a story of great hope. The response to that has been, and actually Monsanto stole that ad idea. This is how we knew it was good, because they focus group, poll, and test everything. They came out with their own Food is Love series. And then, of course, they spent, and we tracked this funding on the U.S. Right to Know website, usrtk.org. It was $103 million entirely from corporation. Not one single human donated to those campaigns in the 4 states that ran ballot initiatives. So that was Washington, Oregon, Colorado, and California. And since then, we kind of became obsessed. My co-worker in that campaign, Gary Ruskin, was the campaign manager. You know, how are they doing this? How is it such a full court, consistent messaging coming from so many angles? Kind of how is that whole operation working? So we started to research that. That really was the impetus of US Right to Know. And we've since done, we started in 2014, so lots of Freedom of Information Act requests, lots of other kinds of investigations, thousands of documents that have come out of those efforts, as well as lawsuits, because now Monsanto is getting sued by over 1,000 farmers and their families, people suffering from non-Hodgkin's lymphoma over glyphosate exposure. And those lawsuits have, the discovery through that has unearthed many, many more secrets. And so the picture is starting to come clear, kind of the how they're doing it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the messaging and then some of the tactics. And as Ignacio said, it's been 40 years of promises that haven't panned out. And now it's shifting to the public dialogue is shifting to, well, these new technologies, synthetic biology, CRISPR, gene editing sounds so benign, like we're just fixing a little mistake that nature made. So this, and it's not GMO. These sorts of messages are really what the industry is focusing on, not health and environmental safety. So we've all heard the messages, GMOs are necessary to feed the world. They will enhance vitamins, resist drought, cure the blind. Pesticides are safe, GMOs are safe, necessary. Anyone who questions them, to even question them, is anti-science and radical. There's also a big attack on the organic industry. And you may have heard some of these messages too. Well, organic eaters are just elitist, nanny, lecturers telling the rest of us what to do. The tyranny of the organic mommy mafia. That's one of the headlines in New York Daily News. I tell about that story in a lot of my presentations because when I looked into who the sources were, it's front groups and professors who work with front groups and professors who wrote reports attacking the organic industry while taking money from the biotech industry and working directly with Monsanto to attack organic and GMO activists while keeping Monsanto's fingerprints hidden. And then it turned out the writer herself also was aligned with one of these front groups. So the how they do it, the bottom line is keeping this system going, an industrialized, chemical-intensive, genetically engineered, corporate-controlled food, farming, and land use system necessitates they have to run massive propaganda campaigns. And that is staggering, the numbers associated with that. I did a report a couple of years ago, and we're now updating it with Friends of the Earth and Anna LePay, called Spinning Food, where we looked at some of the groups, the money they're spending, consistent messaging. We found it was almost $1 billion, actually, over 5 years spent on communications campaigns and some of that lobbying on a very pretty narrow set of messages. GMOs are necessary, pesticides are safe, organic is not worth the money, and this, we have to continue, the factory farming system is not that harmful, and we really don't use that many antibiotics. And so the soldiers in that war of misinformation are many. We've got the front groups, over $10 million a year being spent on about 15 front groups, Food and Farming Alliance, the Center for Integrity, Coalition for Safe Food, these sorts of names, Academics Review. That was the one where we had all the emails showing this Academics Review started by a professor at the University of Illinois. They produced a report attacking the organic industry, said 15 times they are independent, completely independent. It's all over their website, all over their report. We have the emails showing this fellow, his name is Bruce Chassie, working directly with Monsanto and their top PR guys to find the money to set up a front group to attack activists and hide the money. So it's pretty clear what's gone on there. That's a very stark example, but there are lots of people involved in this system. Professors who are taking the lead from Monsanto in what they write, what headlines they should use, where it gets published, and then the PR support behind the scenes to push those articles out all over the internet. So the front groups, professors, journalists, some key well-placed journalists who repeat the industry's messaging very reliably. And of course, they have a great control over what science gets done in the first place due to research dollars that go to universities. So, massive propaganda campaign, staggering in scope, hundreds of millions of dollars, and yet, still, more and more and more people every year, people across all demographics, across this country, around the world, in industrialized countries, want organic food. That demand is increasing. People want to know where their food comes from and how it's produced. And so they're not winning in the marketplace. What they are controlling is the policymakers, the media elite, and the rules that get set for how genetic engineering is used and brought into the world. And so that's where I think Jennifer Doudna's nightmares and time awake at night is really real, because we have to consider those technologies rolling out in a system that is working for profit and not for the common good. And so I don't see how we get past that, but for we have to stay in the game. Consumer activists, those of us who care about food, who know food as a source of healing for the planet and for ourselves. And so thank you to all of you for all of the educating that you do in your own lives about food as healing and the potential for changing our food system to set us on a path to healing.
By the way, Friends of the Earth came out with this brochure that's on a lot of the tables out there. I have a few extra if anybody else wants one, but Stacy was real involved in helping to put this together too. Thank you, Stacy. So our next speaker is Michael Hansen. Michael is the senior scientist at Consumers Union. He's a biologist and ecologist who did his PhD in the techniques of integrated pest management. Consumers Union is an NGO focusing on product testing, investigative journalism, and consumer advocacy, founded in 1936. I almost feel like I grew up with Consumers Union. From everything from doing the fight against, getting seatbelts in automobiles to fighting the tobacco industry, which it's amazing how many things that we're dealing with are reminiscent of that fight against the tobacco industry. But anyway, and in addition to that, Michael has been, for I think all of the people in NGOs, et cetera, that have been trying to get their handle around the science behind many of these emerging technologies, always Michael, who we all go to help us understand that. So he's played a huge role in that. He's also been very involved in the Codex Alimentarius Commission, which is the intergovernmental body within the framework of the Joint Food Standards Program established by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations and the World Health Organization. So he's been helping in that battle on the worldwide front as well. So thank you for being here, Michael. Oh, and you've got to tell us the story about the Impossible Burger too, which is, thank you.
Thank you. It's actually an honor to speak here. In addition to what Mark said, I would just like to point out that Consumers Union was a founding member of Consumers International, and that's a global network. We have 220 members in 115 countries. And so in addition to the work at Codex, I've done a lot of work helping consumer and peasant organizations around the world, but particularly in Asia, educating them about the this whole issue of genetic engineering, and I'd like to follow up first on some of the things that Ignacio was saying. This is all really is based on the central dogma, and that's the idea that DNA is the master molecule, right? The DNA causes everything, and so the only thing that you need to do is once you can find the proper gene, then you'll get the trait you want. And of course, what that completely ignores is biology has told us since then that the central dogma said DNA is the master molecule. Information flows one way, from DNA through RNA onto the trait, right? We now know that there's actually this feedback system that happens, and information comes from various places. And so the problem with genetic engineering is it really is this myopic focus on thinking that DNA is the answer and not looking at the context, not looking at the ecology of the situation, whether it's for the organisms themselves individually or their populations. That's why even though there have been over 15,000 field trials in the US involving 70 different plants, virtually none of that has led to commercial products because they keep on failing over and over again. They've now come up with this next generation, and the way they push it is this semantic intervention. It isn't just using that term. Even the term gene editing is a semantic intervention, because when you listen to that term, you think, oh, editing. Editing is something that's very precise, right? And this isn't. And in fact, what's interesting is the people that are pushing these new waves, when the first wave of GE came in, they talked about how much more precise it was than conventional breeding, because with conventional breeding, you're mixing thousands of genes or tens of thousands of genes, whereas with GE, we just move one, right? Well, but they couldn't control where they were inserting it, so that led to all this unexpected variability. They kept on denying that would happen, and then 30 years later, what is their argument for the use of gene editing that? It's like, well, this first generation is really not that exact. This new generation, gene editing, is far more precise and accurate. And then I would have reporters come to me and say, talk about how isn't this far more accurate? Because with conventional genetic engineering, you can have, since you can't control where you're inserting something, it can cause all these off-target effects, and this is a much more precise technology. And I just sort of laugh when I hear that, because what I would tell these reporters is, you know what? 30 years ago, that was the same argument that they used when genetic engineering was coming in, comparing it to conventional breeding, that it's more precise and more accurate. Some of us were saying back then, no, it's not. There's all these off-target effects because you can't control where things are being inserted. So what do? 30 years later, they admit, yes, there are all these problems. We can't get them to work. So we'll have this more precise thing. And they even use the term editing, because everyone thinks about how precise that is. But what they don't realize is not only does it cut, you can tell it where to cut, but it not only cuts there, that same sequence, it'll cut wherever it sees it, and if it's a similar sequence, it might cut there. So that means you can get all these off-target effects with gene editing as well. And so, for example, CRISPR has been hyped about how exact it is and how it does all these wonderful things. In June this year, there was an article published where they looked at these mice that they edited one gene that was causing blindness. And what they did is they did whole genome sequencing. And they looked at, they used CRISPR to make in 2 strains of mice, specific changes just in one gene. So what the scientists did is they said, well, let's scan the whole genome. And we'll compare that to other mice and see how many changes have been made. So in addition to the intended change, this group found in one strain of mouse the single nucleotide variants. These are individual base pair changes. In one strain, it was 1,736. In the other strain, it was 1,696. Oh, and also, in addition to those kind of mutations, you you got what are called indels, and that stands for insertions or deletions, right? So in one strain it was 164, the other it was 128. And furthermore, when they looked at a database of the genomes of 36 strains of mice that are part of this mouse genome project, all these changes that they think might have been made by CRISPR weren't found in any of them. So there's all these off-target effects with CRISPR, and so it's not exact as you think. In fact, just about 2 weeks ago, people probably saw that big story about how for the first time in a human embryo, they made an exact change and they only affected that gene and didn't affect anything else. Well, it now turns out that George Church and others at Harvard have pointed out the serious problems in that study about they really didn't look and they didn't sequence the whole genome. So if you get a deletion that's more than 200 base pairs, it would look like there's no change when, of course, there has been a change. So I think the point is these gene editing technologies, they think they're going to be far more exact, but again, what they're focusing on is that the genes are the only things that are important, not the context, not the whole context of the genome or the population they're in. And before I tell you the Impossible food story, the Impossible burger story, I just want to mention when I was flying out here, I picked up the this week's New Yorker, and there's a wonderful article by Mukherjee, and it's on cancer and how people have focused on the genetics of cancer and finding the genes that cause cancer, and they're starting to realize that that's really a bad focus, because it turns out many people can have those cancerous genes or even cancerous segments, but they don't develop cancer. Why is that? Because cancer is an interaction between genetic change and the environment that it's in, that is the tissues. And all of cancer research has focused on the seed, which is what they call the DNA, right? Without looking at the ecology of the organs and the cell systems they're going into. And some people now are realizing that, wait a minute, actually we need to look at this at the whole system. And when I read that article, I said, this is a perfect analogy for what's happening with these next-gen biotech products. Because again, they think that genetics is everything. That once we know the genes, we completely understand things, but we don't. And very quickly, that human genome project that Ignacio talked about when Craig Venter and all them stood up, what they had done is they'd sequenced the human genome. And what they realized at the time is they thought, then we'll be able to, cure all these diseases. And at the end of the day, they said, wait a minute, there's only 25,000 genes. There's hundreds of thousands of proteins. That means genes can't be the only thing. So very quickly with the Impossible Burger, what I want to talk about that is this plant-based burger, but yet it bleeds and looks like a regular hamburger, and that's because of the presence of this heme or hemoglobin. And I should point out that what they've done is, even though this soy leg hemoglobin that they're putting into this burger, that's never been in the human food supply before. That soy leg hemoglobin is only found in the root nodules of the soybeans, right? So that means it's never been in the human food supply. Now they want to add it into a food and not do any safety testing. And that's completely crazy, because what's interesting is actually there are 3 different hemoglobins that occur in soybeans. There's hemoglobin, truncated hemoglobin, and leg hemoglobin. The first 2 are found in the above ground portions of the plant. Why didn't they use those? Because at least you could have some argument that maybe those had been in the food supply before. This hasn't. And in fact, when they submitted this GRAS petition, this generally recognized as safe notification to the FDA, they didn't really have any data. They literally, all they did was say, well, soy-leg hemoglobin, that's similar to all these other hemoglobins when you look at its three-dimensional structure. That's also similar to molecules that bind oxygen and heme, which is iron, and such as myoglobin. And we've been eating myoglobin for thousands of years, so this is just the same thing. No, it's not. This is a new food additive. And it did not go through any safety assessment. The FDA properly, in their case, they pointed this out to the company. And it turns out that thing that is over 1% of the weight of the Impossible Burger, it's not all just this soy-leg hemoglobin. In fact, only 72% of their product is the soy-leg hemoglobin. What's the other 27%? Well, that's 46 other proteins that come from the yeast that was engineered from the vat. Again, all those materials have never been in the food supply, and as the FDA told the company, the data that you've submitted do not meet general recognition of safety. You would have to demonstrate that not only is the soy-leg hemoglobin safe, but the other 46 proteins are. And I should point out, the company submitted this GRAS notification in 2014. A year later, in 2015, they withdrew it. The reason they withdrew it is they knew that the FDA wasn't going to say anything positive. There was a FOIA earlier this year that was done by Friends of the Earth and ETC Group, and all this came out about basically how bad their lack of data was. And what they did is, here the FDA has told them, you have not demonstrated this as safe, and they just ignored that. And in the first place the Impossible Burger was sold was at Momofuku in New York City. Now it's in all these various chains. They're ramping up. They claim they're going to be in 1,000 fast food chains by the end of the year. They announced yesterday this new facility in Oakland, and it's based on, they spin this tale about how wonderful this is, but there's no data to suggest it's safe. And as the FDA said, there's evidence to suggest that there could be problems here. And I'd just like to say one more thing before I go, because I've had calls from reporters and others saying that they'd heard that maybe Big Meat put pressure on the FDA to go after this company. And my response to that is, I don't know whether that's happening. All the FDA was doing their job, because when you look at the data they submitted, it was horrible. And so the fact that anyone who says that this product should be fine, it contains an ingredient that's never been in the food supply and has not gone through any basic safety assessment. That should not be acceptable, whether the product is engineered or not. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. And by the way, you can buy those burgers. They're for sale. I don't know where you get them, but they're if you want to taste one. So
actually, Dana could tell us that there's 5 or 6 chains here in the Bay Area that sell them.
yeah, which is shocking. So thank you. You know, you can tell that, you know, we could go on for hours in this conversation, and it is amazing. You know, we only really touched on some of the technologies that are, you know, like I wish we had talked a little bit about gene drives, which you just read about them, and it's like you might as well be reading science fiction. It's kind of so scary, the implications. But thank you. Read your pamphlets. That'll give you a little bit more background. And I think that we are going to tie it up, and the next folks are ready. Well, we've kind of run out of time, and I didn't, Aaron, do we have questions? No questions? Yeah, I'm sorry, we kind of ran out of time. I apologize. You know, our speakers will be around to talk some, I believe. Thank you.
Who learned a lot from those panelists. Thank you so much. Okay, we now have our last plenary of the day, and I am delighted to welcome up Leah to the stage. We will be talking about agroecology, and Miguel spoke about it at the beginning, but this is some fascinating content that approaches this topic from a critical viewpoint that is yet to be discussed. So we're really excited to bring this perspective, these voices, to Soil Not Oil.
Thank you, Erin. All right, we're going to get all PowerPointed up for you. Great. Okay, hello everyone. My name's Leah Atwood, and I'm one of the cooperative directors for MESA. I'm very honored and privileged and delighted to be with this panel for you this afternoon. This is the second time we've done this topic at Soil Not Oil, and I think it's such a crucial perspective to be part of this conversation. We talk a lot about the implications of the food system being so fossil fuel dependent and so environmentally and climate devastating. But we get the chance to talk, or we don't get the chance, we make less effort, I think, to talk a lot about the more socio-political aspects of agroecology. And I think it's so crucial to have a global perspective in this and looking at the underlying causes that are connected. So our speakers are going to be sharing through a diversity of lenses, looking at the power structures that are desperately clinging onto the system status quo. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background on MESA and our network, and a little bit about the little more explanation on the power systems we're talking about, and then I'm going to introduce the speakers and hand it over. Oh, it's too speedy for me. Okay, so MESA's vision is a vision. It's a world where farmers and indigenous knowledge are celebrated as the heart of community resilience. And our theory of change is that to transform the food system in the face of a multinational food regime, that we need multinational grassroots organizing. And that needs to be, the values need to be placing the well-being of people and the planet above deep pocket profits. So this is our global heartbeat. This is what keeps us going. This is our community. And so MESA's role is through the horizontal exchange of strategies in food sovereignty and experiential learning in agroecology. We're connecting change makers to regenerate community food systems. And that's by linking ancestral knowledge and innovation that's rooted in earth stewardship, fair economies, and multicultural alliances worldwide. So this work is about connection, collaboration, and reviving each other. So our main key scopes of work are our global network, and this is partnering with grassroots organizations and social movements around the world for short and long-term knowledge exchanges. So folks from Via Campesina, from the MST, and these larger social movements, to smaller grassroots nonprofits, like Paul is going to share about from GBIAC, the Grow Biointensive Institute in Kenya. And second, we have a small grant and microfinance program that is supporting on-farm collaboration, and this is to help beginning farmers learn with experienced farmers that want to pass on their knowledge. And a farm-based social learning platform. I hope I'm not making you dizzy with this. which is an online platform that is integrating ecological production with socio-political activation and economic viability. And the goal is to amplify the voices that are already out there and organize it in a way that can make it really relevant for on-the-farm applied learning. So right now we have 4 courses: applied agroecology, organic seed production, and the Bay Area Farmer Training Program, and on-farm mentorship, and about 700 online learners. And then our local food sovereignty mobilization. Anna Galvis is here. Anna, you want to raise your hand? Oh, there she is. So Anna is one of the educators for our Bay Area Farmer Training Program, which combines a 3-month intensive in agroecology with mentorship, internship, seed grants, and eventually the formation of a worker-owned cooperative focusing on immigrants, formerly incarcerated individuals, women, and refugees. Okay, so this is hopefully a reminder. Is anyone not seeing this slide? Okay, good. So just looking at the concentration and consolidation of power in the food supply, this is a really compelling graphic. And the same goes with our seed system. And most of you know that we've lost an incredible amount of our biodiversity, and right now, over 75% of the global seed market is in the hands of 7 seed companies. And now, I guess, less because Monsanto and Bayer are merging. And so what we don't see so often are the faces behind these corporations. And funny that they all look the same. So this is a really important element of what Bell Hooks talks about, that this is a white supremacist, neo-colonial, neoliberal patriarchy, capitalist patriarchy. And these are the fine gentlemen that are clinging so desperately. So another way of saying that is pasty, oppressive, oligarchical patriarchy of the global food system. So it's poops, right? And we're going to talk about composting, so just bear with me. So, and they are so intimately connected to one of the main food system crises of our time, which is land grabbing. And I think there's a really important parallel to talk about in the global land grabbing and what's happening in our community here as well, with people being forced out of their communities because they can't afford to live in a place where rent is skyrocketing. And so you can see here where the majority of the land grabbing is taking place in Africa and Southeast Asia, but it is really worldwide. And so this is resulting in these kind of travesties where almost 8 million people are hungry. This food system is built around industrial farming systems, the use of non-renewable, unsustainable inputs. The farm sector's debt-to-income ratio is the highest it's been in 30 years. It's exploitative of workers, and the food system produces over a third of our greenhouse gases while using over 70% of our fresh water. And these statistics are less commonly known. This was a census. This is a slide that Anna put together, looking at ownership of farms and operation of farms in the U.S. And so I'm running out of time, so just take a look at that and see what you see. And so we want to take these elements that the poops are resulting in, and we want, in this talk of resistance and regeneration, I think we get intimidated a lot about how to start, and that these structures are so huge that can we really break them down? And I think compost is the perfect analogy, because it is the formation of breaking things down and building something up, and we really need to be doing both simultaneously in order for any kind of transformation to happen. Okay, and I want to make sure that everyone has a good definition of food sovereignty and the difference between food sovereignty and food security. This is a term coined by Via Campesina, and that really hones in on it's not just enough to have access, but to have control over your food system and be able to define it. Okay, I'm gonna skip ahead here and just want to give note to the faces of the small farmers and women of color that make up the over 70% of the world's food producers, not those other guys. And just end on this quote of our amazing thought leader and activist Frederick Douglass: power conceives nothing without a demand. It never did and it never will. And this is so relevant today. And I want to thank our speakers for demanding this work and doing this work with such heart and tenacity and courage. And so I'm going to introduce everyone at once so I take up less time. But Paul Simiu is a farmer from Kenya. Paul has taught hundreds and worked alongside hundreds of farmers throughout East Africa, teaching agroecology and biointensive. And he's here in the US for a year to do a learn and share exchange with a farmer from Mexico and a farmer from California. And I'll move down to Brandy Mack. Brandy, thank you so much for being here. She jumped in last minute when one of our speakers from Cuba, who was stuck in the hurricane, couldn't come. So you may have noticed on the write-up that we have changed. But Brandy is an incredible activist. She's one of the directors of the butterfly movement. I always want to call it Mariposa. The butterfly movement. She's a permaculture activist and trained by Starhawk. And she's an incredible leader in our community. Thank you so much, Brandy, for being here. And Katie Hackmeyer. Katie is a full-time farmer and owner at Red H Farm. She's also a professor at Sonoma State. She's been recognized by the FAO and quite a long list of accomplishments. And she's an author and an activist, and we're so grateful that Katie could also join us today, last minute, for our other participant from Mexico who was not able to join us. And last but not least, Anuradha Rasange from Sri Lanka. Aradna is a farmer and a organizer for the Participatory Guarantee System in Sri Lanka, which is an alternative for organic third-party certification and used by iPhone. He grew up on his family's farm, and he's also one of the youth organizers at the Good Market, which he's going to tell you all about. So I will hand it over.
Thank you. Good evening. Quite exciting. So I would like to share my experience on Good Market Guarantee Limited with the PGS experience. So this is a totally community-driven initiative we implemented in Sri Lanka to address the sort of problems which we faced because of the new emerging economies. All right. So I'll give a brief introduction about me. So I grew up in a farm family, as Leah said. So I'm a part of MESA program for this year. I got the opportunity to participate MESA internship program. And I'm working with smallholder farmers in the country, consulting and helping them to build organic agricultural systems in the country. So in a nutshell about Sri Lankan agriculture, we have the effect of colonization of British since 1796. And all our agricultural system changed to tea, rubber, coconut, and cinnamon, so we lost our traditional agricultural systems. So we apart from that, we produce locally all the vegetables, grains, and yams. And major export crops are coconut tree, rubber, and cinnamon. And average income is $948 US per annum. And we suffered 30 years from a very devastating war, and now we are healing after 10 years. And we have an indigenous weather population, but they also threaten to extinct because of these globalization issues. So we face lots of challenges in our food sovereignty and our food consumption patterns. So I'll briefly explain those challenges. So because of our 30 years war, our poverty line on the districts of faced for the war strictly affected by poverty. And we have a huge influence by India. So we are very small, tiny little country below India, and India is 60 times bigger than Sri Lanka. So almost always, lots of products which we could grow easily in Sri Lanka will come as import products like chili, onions, and our local farmers have lots of troubles to sell their products at a reasonable price. So there's no marketplace for locally grown produce. Then we have a land issue because big agricultural corporations they are growing monoculture crops, and they are grabbing lands in the country. Because of the big companies and big initiatives, we have a human-elephant conflict because big companies, they have electric fences and they have lots of development technology. So they cover their elephant corridors. So elephants reduce their natural forest areas. Now they are coming and attacking the smallholder farmers. That's becoming an increasing problem in Sri Lanka. And on the other end, all small farmers, they are losing their land due to infrastructure development and some other development activities in the country. So it's very hard for young people like us to find land for farming. So we are in a huge competition because of all these issues. Then climate change also affecting us a lot in present decades. We face floods and longer droughts. And due to high temperature, we have pest problems emerging, and large number of monoculture plantations are happening like corn, sugarcane, and banana. And we are losing our traditional farming methods. Then, because of 30 years war, we have lots of war widows in the northern part of the country. And as commonly as an Asian culture, lots of women, they stay at their homes and help in their family. So we wanted another source of income generation pattern especially for the women who are based in their homes and need to increase family income and nutrition. That's also another issue in Sri Lanka. So lack of market opportunities for smallholder farmers, that's another problem because smallholder farmers, they produce in a small scale, but because their production scale doesn't match with the bigger scale, so they are having issues to market their products. And because of this issue, there's lots of middleman exploitation. Middlemen try to buy their products at a lower level, paying lower margin for the smallholder farmers. And another emerging challenge because of organic agriculture, third-party bigger certifications companies, they make an awareness in the community, organic produce should be certified by a company. So smallholder farmers, they can't afford because these third-party certifications are very expensive, and even if a farmer or farmer group afford for the certification, the products are very expensive, so this middle income level or lower income level consumers can't afford for the certified product by a third-party company, certification company. So we were looking for strategies how to overcome from all the issues. So we identified farmer network and community-created marketplace will be solve these kinds of issues. So our main intention was to connect smallholder farmers and the consumers in a one stage. So then everybody have access to information. Then everybody knows who is doing what and what is happening in the country. And connect farmers and consumers, they can meet together. So good market is our concept. So we created a marketplace, equal marketplace. So this is the market in this side. So it's 8 to 8, all 360 all year. It's open. It's a shop, and this is an event. It's happening in once a week, in every Saturday, once in a week. So farmers and consumers and producers, they get together and sell their products. That's the connecting networking procedure of the people. So we started this concept in 2012. So initially there were 20 farmers and vendors. So all the farmers and vendors were only 20. So it was happening, the event was only happening at that moment. So it was a totally volunteer-driven event at that moment. Then we wanted an alternative system for the third-party certification. So we identified PGS is the best solution. So we introduced PGS as an alternative solution for smallholder farmers and certification system. So this system consists of producers and consumers. So consumers with a technical leader, they go and inspect all the farm fields who applied for the PGS certificate. Then technical leaders, they inspect the field and they inspect all the documents and they give recommendations, and we have the process to issue the certificate. So it's very low costly. I'm working as a technical leader, so I go and visit fields to educate and So this is a model. So we go and help. We meet the farm. We go and inspect farmers and issue the third-party certification. The standards are almost same for the third-party certification, but it's very cheap, and the consumers also can get a chance to go and see the fields and farms, and they meet each other and they issue the certificate. So all the standards based from IFOM, or known as International Foundation for Organic Agricultural Movements. So it's a movement represent close to 800 farmers. We are 800 affiliated bodies. We are one of the body recognized by the IFOM among 117 countries in the world. So it operates on the key PGS elements and follow organic agriculture principles all. So today, now we are very happy. We have more than 300 certified vendors in our journey within this 5 years period. And we have more than 175 PGS certified farmers in the country. Oh. So we have 170 certified PGS certified farmers, and we are IFOM accredited organization body or IFOM accredited certification body. It's very hard process, but because of our dedication, we became to achieve that goal. So this is our theme. Good for the planet, good for the country, good for you. We are representing good market. Thank you very much for sharing my opinion.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much for allowing me, for giving me this time to be here.
Sorry, I think the presentations are in a different order. So, Paul, you're going to go. Okay, no, you got it. Awesome, you're on it. Thank you. You're going to keep going. Sorry, Paul.
Thank you. I was saying that I feel so much privileged to stand before you, to be here to share with you. As you were told earlier, I come from Kenya, East African country. East Africa, part of Africa. So I say thank you to be here, and for those attendants who have come here today, and the organizers, and Mesa, I say thank you very much to plan this event to happen like this. I understand it's not easy. So I come from Kenya, and as I said, my name is Paul Simiyu. Back at home, they call me Kaka Paul. Kaka Paul means brother Paul. So most of them, they call me Kaka Paul. And even others call me Mr. Soil, because most of the time I like to talk about the soil. So here I have passion on agriculture. I was brought up by my grandmom. And my grandmom is the one who showed me how to farm and how to love agriculture. My grandmom is the one who showed me how to do or how to love agriculture. So as you can see here, you may see like I'm in the bush, but not in the bush. I'm in the bush of vegetables. So this is the work that I work in Kenya because of the passion I have. Sorry.
There you go.
I am blessed with I have family, as I said. That's my grandmom, as I said. And also, that's my wife, and that's my all family. I have 3 daughters. Yeah, so I eat traditional food. That's why you see I might seem like to be under 20 because of traditional food. Thank you. Agriculture in Kenya. When I was young, when I was farming with my grandmom, it was totally different because we used to go in the farm and we used to grow so much food. And the way we used to see people, when I used to see people, they used to grow food. And this food, the type of the pattern that we used to produce food, it really changed completely. Because when I was young, we used to produce food. The time of planting, we used to plant in February. It reached a time, then we were planting March. It reached a time, then April. Now at this moment, as I speak, we are planting like May now, early May, sometimes like late April. So the type of the pattern of planting has completely changed. And this has been caused by the climatic condition in Kenya. But before I move to that, I would like to talk about the colonization, which has also it's just in our brain so much. The roots of the colonization go back to the Berlin Conference in 1885, when East Africa was first divided into territories by England and European powers. That's why most of the time that we see our people, the way we do, the way we farm, the crops that we grow, we can stick on some crops that this is what we want to do, this is what we want to plant because of the colonization that we have in our brain. So, but agriculture production comes from small-scale farmers. Like in our place, 75% of agriculture comes from small-scale farmers. And not even in our country alone. Even if you go many countries, small-scale farmers are the ones that are producing too much food for the people or for the country, as you can also see. Then 80% of population are farmers, but still we import some crops. Even if we are farming, like 60% we import outside to the country. Then we have average of 1,160 pounds, not pounds, dollars, that is per year, household per year. As I mentioned earlier about the drought or climatic change has caused so many problems in our places, as you can see. Like those who followed early this year, in our place in Kenya, some people lost their lives. Even animals, especially those pastoralists who rely on animals, they even started to suffer. Others lost their lives because they had nothing to eat. All places was dry. So this developed our people, made our country people to be so much poor, because they had nothing to do. Even the country had to spend money to import some food into the country. And that money is maybe planned to do something else. So it contributed a lot to our country. Even you see like some animals, because they did not have anything to eat. Like you see a photo of an image of an animal here dying because it ate the grass which had been used to thatch the house. Then it had like some problems, then it died because there was nothing for the animals to eat at all. Then, very difficult in my place, as I speak right now, it's very difficult for a person to access the land or to buy the land because it's very, very, very much expensive. Big companies, they are able to have the land because they have money they can buy. Like I speak here, there's a project that we are setting. We are buying the land, but still it's very much expensive. So in Kenya, it's not easy to have the land. Maybe in some areas. Then we have what we call, these are the challenges I'm trying to address, or to speak about. We also have what we call lack of government regulation and market liberalization, harms small-scale farmers, food imports flood local markets. So liberalization, government regulation, because the market is just free. Any person, big companies, corporates, they can do a lot of farming. Then they flood the market. But small scale, when they produce, it's like a problem because now the market is not good. And because now the strategies for the market is not good, when they produce, the produce come together with people from corporates. So they don't have the space, they don't have the place to sell their produce. Now, at long last, like small-scale farmers, they are not making any money. They are not enjoying at all the fruits of their farming. This is what we are experiencing. But we are trying very hard so that next time or in future, or as activists, so that we come together because we are planning to set up, we are working with what we call Kenya Organic Agriculture Network. Kenya Organic Agriculture Network, I think this one is now the one to save the farmers. Because now it's the one to bring farmers together, to create that certification, to create that PGS, participatory guarantee system, to form them. After farmers have been certified, now they can bring their staffs, their produce to the market to sell. Because we are now planning to come up with the good places for the organic farmers to sell their products. I think this is going to save our people. Then I would like to talk about the corporate influence on government, land seeds. You see, in our places, we have big companies. We have Monsanto companies in our places. So this one, when we say we don't want this one, like we say that no GMO in Kenya, because like here, I don't know if I have some photos here. We are demonstrating and saying no GMO. But now these big companies, they come to our people. They say, no, this is not supposed to be this. Now they influence the top in the government to enact and pass the policies which are now coming to affect the farmers, and because they have that big influence in the government. And still they can own the land because they have the money. They have the money, so they can do anything. And still we have top people in the government. They grab the land. And when they grab the land, government cannot do anything because they have money and they have influence in the government. We also have infrastructure. We have infrastructure in our place as a challenge because farmers cannot access or cannot take the produce to the market as it's supposed to be because of the roads and everything. Transportation sometimes becomes a problem. As you can see here, I was working with an organization known as GBAC, and GBAC is to train farmers. And as you can see there, I'm in the class training the farmers because we receive so many farmers from different countries, from different parts of Africa. So my work is to train, and as you can see the photos, This is the photo after training the farmers. Like here, I train farmers. We go to different parts of our country to train farmers. And I work with the Sisters Association of Kenya, and we go to train farmers. I also studied biointensive agriculture, and we have principles of biointensive agriculture. And this is the only way, also one way of trying to heal our earth. If we don't do this, then we can't. I have all these principles. When you follow them, then you will see the fact part of it. I like to work with the children together. I like to train in the communities, as you see. Then I also, we have what we call orphan, our crops orphan. The crops orphan, these are the indigenous food that our people have left because they think that these are the crops or the food that belongs to the poor. But now they have come to realize that this is the important food that we need to have. So we go to people, then we create that awareness to see the important part of it, to come to the crops again. These are like sorghum, our millet, our sweet potatoes. Thank you. And as you can see, I was also showing, I had also time, I went to Ghana also to talk to people. I went to Ghana to train people. And still, as I'm here right now, I was in Ghana. I was sent in Ghana to train people. And right now, I'm here, this is my second internship. And we have, because I'm so much interested to work with my communities. Where I was working is very far from my community. Now I've decided to go back to my community. Now we have started a project, and the name of the project is CADEP. That is Communities in Action Development Project Kenya. I'm working with old women or old people so that we empower them with some project because they support the orphans, so that they can be able to support the orphans. I also like to have passion to work with the children, because these children, they are less advantaged and most of them are orphans. So this CADEP is the one going to support the orphans to continue with their education. So when I go back, these are the people I'm going to work with, and also to work with the communities, to work with the schools, institutions, to train them. Right now, as I speak, we have started developing, we have started to pay the farm. And this farm is the one which we are going to start to develop the projects, like a demonstration garden where people will be coming to learn, and where the orphans will be getting food. Because right now I have some orphans I live with. So they will be getting food there, we get income from there, and we train also from there. So I also work dehydration, food addition, solar cookers, I train my people. I work with old women, as I said, different people. Maybe I can read for you one thing. This is from Mandela. Overcoming poverty is not a task of charity. It is an act of justice, like slavery and apartheid. Poverty is not natural. It is man-made, and it can be overcome and eradicated by the action of human beings. Sometimes it falls on a generation to be great. You can be that great generation. Let your greatness blossom. Nelson Mandela. Thank you very much.
How's everybody? Okay, can people say soil, not oil? Soil, not oil. Okay, so can we say divest and invest? Because I just wanted to start with like the answer on what we needed to really be doing here, right? We must begin to divest from certain things and invest in others, correct? Okay, and you all here are available to know that. I guess, I don't know how to work this clicker thing. Is there something up here? Because the image is great, but the action is more needed, is what I want to say. In fact, I'm grateful, thank y'all last minute, like, you know, hey, Sister B, we're talking about liberation, and we need to go beyond diversity and go into liberation, correct? Soil, not oil. I just want to go there. There's no more soil coming from another planet is what I like to tell the girls when I'm working with them. We got to build this stuff right here. We got to build it up. Okay? Y'all can clap for that too. It's okay. Just felt like the energy was getting a little stale and the planet is heating up and we need to get a little bit excited is what I'm saying. We have to divest and invest in some other things. I grew up in Oakland, Berkeley, and the state of California. My papa was a farmer. He would be laughing now if he heard urban farmer. He was in Orville, California. This is where I would spend my summers coming from Oakland with parents that were organizing, living in the city. So here we are going to Orville, and they were real farmers, y'all. You understand what I'm saying? Tomatoes, bell peppers, stuff had to be ready for the store because this was his business and livelihood. Here I come with my little fancy city self to Orville, and my cousins who had the real privilege to live with the grandparents, they said, you know, we got to get up before day. I said, before day? What are you talking about? We got to work the farm. If you don't work, you gonna get in trouble. And I'm thinking, okay, I said, we could call CPS. We don't have to do this kind of stuff anymore. We are liberated. We don't have to do these things. They said, well, you ain't gonna eat. You better get up. I won't go deeper in the story. Papa is laughing right now. I say to him, out of all the grandchildren, which was over 20, here I am, have decided to take upon this task of farming. Who knew? This girl would have 15 chickens in her backyard in deep West Oakland, huh? Right? Talking about she had chickens in her backyard in West Oakland. Who knew? I thought it was slavery. But what I'm grateful for, and I had to open up with that, is the resilience that it gave me. Because though I had the privilege to go to my grandpa's in Orville, California every summer, I also was a child that grew up in deep East Oakland in the streets where folks were murdered and killed and shot right in front of me. As a part of the oppression and the systematic systems of pipeline to prisons, I also fell subject, I ain't gonna say fell subject, but I became a mother as a teenager. My daughter, like you, I actually have 3 daughters, 21, 17, and 10. The oldest is finishing up her last year at UC Berkeley. She's an artificial intelligence engineer. I don't know. I don't know. We work together, we're working on it. It's like, I tell people her mother is a farmer, okay? No matter what she's doing, she knows how to grow her own food. Having these children, and myself being a woman who went through so many different adversities, Dr. Joy DeGruy, and if you don't know who she is, she's published a book called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. I'd like you to get it if you're in the room and you're talking about divesting and investing and wanting to value and make new relationships. Because here's the thing, y'all. We got to get uncomfortable to grow. Seems like we've been just too damn comfortable. I mean, okay, we got any farmers in the room? You know, when you plant a seed or something, if you ever had like a time-lapse camera and you watch it like germinate and it's getting ready to pop, can't you imagine that shit is uncomfortable coming through the soil? And then just to pop up and hopefully not be in a windbreak somewhere, right? Blowing in shit like this. And then still continues to grow even if we forget to water. Oh, I'm just saying, because hopefully it's a native. But here's what I want to say. It's time for us to get uncomfortable so that we can grow, period. So here I am with these 3 beautiful daughters, and I want to train them on how to take over the world. I want them to know how to grow food. I want them to know how to be outdoors. Because you have to understand, for most folks melanated in America, and I'm speaking from my experience, are traumatized just to go outside. Literally. So here I am with these young girls because now I've grown up and I don't feel like Papa's work was slavery. Now I feel like I was privileged because I had preserves in the counter. We had our own eggs. Now I was scared to go in the chicken coop as a child. Who knew? I'd be like, we gonna eat those eggs? We can't go to the store? We can't get no Captain Crunch? We gotta eat this stuff y'all grow? Oh my God. Who knew? We gotta grind the meat. You mean we making hog head cheese from the hogs that was outside? Ugh. I was privileged. We ran around outside in Oroville Dam, we hung out, we went crawdad fishing, and when I came back to the Bay Area in Oakland and I walked down the streets of 98th and Cherry and Deep East Oakland and watched half of the class of folks that I went to school with murdered, watched systematic oppression every single corner you turned around to, I was privileged to be on that farm. I had no idea. I had imagination. That's where resilience started for me. So with that biased intention, I thought, well, when people say, wow, you've done so great, with the, you've done so good. I said, you know why? Because my papa was a farmer. And my grandmother was a farmer. And this is what they taught us. Even though if they were living, they'd be laughing. I'm talking about I would hide in the citrus trees so that I wouldn't have to do the work. I'm not doing this. In fact, I remember saying, I'm walking to town, we're calling CPS. They can't make us do this. But I was able to draw back on those things, so when my children hit the planet, again, being blessed with little girls and wanting them to have this experience, but then also being caught in the idea of living in the city. Over 20 years ago, I helped co-found an organization called the Camp Butterfly is how we started. Let me go there. And what we wanted to do was provide like Girl Scouts for colored girls. We wanted our girls to be outside because what you have to understand is that the Girl Scout and the 4-H club is not fit for all. Sorry. I hope I didn't hurt nobody's feelings. And for me, my intention was to make sure that my children had the same experience that I had in nature, which really was a blessing. That's what created the resilience. Period. So here we are starting Camp Butterfly. The founder and woman, Niambi Echoes, who wrote the book, we met each other at a holistic festival. She had written a book called The Project Butterfly. In this book, if you can, and this is a quick story, there were all these circles and things that she was facilitating with youth, and she wasn't going in the garden. But these were circles that I was doing with my children, and I was doing it in the garden. Because I said, well, the reason the butterfly is so important to me because of the transformation. Here's a question for you. Do you think if a butterfly knew what it took to be a butterfly, do you think it would go through the process? Hell no. Come on now. You got to die damn near. Anybody know the transformation of a butterfly? But literally, that's what happens in order for us to be able to transform. There's a piece of us. I'm calling on some people in the room because there's transformation needed in this movement. It's going to be uncomfortable. There's pieces of you that you almost have to die back. I mean, think about this. Liquefy oneself to only come back and be around for just a bit, not very long, to pollinate. I'm just saying, it's very important, the transformation of a butterfly. That's within all of us as well. We must do that. Say soil, not oil. I just want to keep saying it to remind you why we're here today, because we have to go beyond diversity. And whereas I'm so grateful for the panel, I want us to jump down and start fish bowling sometime. Ain't no them and us. We're all one. We sit on the same dang on toilet, right? Hopefully it's a compost toilet. I'm not going to go there. So I want to give you just this, I guess this, can we do this video? Will it pop up if we push it? Okay, because the video just brings it all together. And so they gave you the titles. I had the privilege of working with Starhawk in Bayview Hunters Point, where Star has spent probably over 20 years working in communities that most folks just go get their PhD on. I'm just going to say it like that, okay? We love to get our research to put in a document about some people and what's happening with them. But I'm going to say something about Starhawk. She's still there. She's still working there. Here I was, working with a group of beautiful girls, because in short, my work biasly is to train young, beautiful, melanated little girls on becoming farm hers. Do you understand me? Like, that's the bias goal at the end of the day. Call it what you want to. So what we do is we use the ecology to help support with personal development. See, look, everything is in the garden. You start as a seed and there's a seed. You can't go killing people. Just put some companion crops down. You feel me? That's how we got to do. So this is what we do with the girls. So we talk about conflict resolution. We talk about all life issues. For me, I can relate anything to the garden. We got gourds all around. I'm thinking about the shake-a-days that we can create from music. Every single thing comes from land. We got to know it. So here we are with this butterfly movement. We offer camps. We do after-school programs. So here I am in San Francisco, because here I am on an assignment to work with some beautiful young black girls in Bayview Hunters Point, which I'm going to say to some folks, how many people know where it is? Just raise your hand and show me. That's much better. By God, I was at the Green Festival, and I said, we're in Bayview, and some people said, where's that? I said, here in San Francisco. Well, where is that? That was kind of scary to me, y'all. It's only 7 by 7. It's only 7 by 7. I love the cards. I'm a Toastmaster, so I'm going to wrap it up, okay? I got the 1-minute card. So what I wanted to talk about this idea of permaculture, agroecology, because I met Starhawk while just working in the garden in San Francisco, and she was coming to volunteer. Here come this woman. I was like, what is this white woman come walking up the hill? Who is this? I didn't know her. Yeah, she come walking up the hill, and I was cooking, because me and the girls every Saturday work in the garden. After we work, we harvest and then we cook what we harvest, and we have conversation. And here comes this woman walking up the hill. She said, hey. And so we're working, and the girls had already knew her. I didn't know her. They said, oh, that's Star. She come to the garden sometime and bring seeds and stuff. What I want to say to this room is that it's time for us to divest and invest. That we can't get together once a year at a panel. We can't just keep giving folks funding for some equipment because we need to pay people. I'm just going to throw it there. I need to train more people to take this over. I'm no good if it's just me with this information. That's the real liberation and going beyond diversity. Thank you.
All right. I'm going to wrap things up here for you guys today. It's been great to hear from the rest of the panelists. It's quite an inspiring group here. And I want to thank Aaliyah for putting the panel together and for the lovely introductions that she gave all of us. I want to spend a couple of moments just telling you a little bit more about my history and how I came to the place I am now, and then I'll get into the meat of what I want to discuss. So I am kind of an accidental farmer. It was not the thing that I intended on doing. I studied political ecology and agroecology during my undergrad at UC Berkeley, and it kind of became the lens for me through which I could understand the world. Food and agriculture I understood it to be the foundation, and I also understood it to be the way in which I could understand political injustices that were taking place around the world. And so I spent a little bit of time after college working in the nonprofit sector for Food First and Community Alliance with family farmers, getting a feel for what it was like to do that kind of advocacy. And I ended up feeling like it was really important that I understand farming on the ground a little bit better if I was going to continue doing that work. So I actually left those organizations and I left the Bay Area because I also felt it was really important to understand what was going on in other parts of the country where it's a little trickier to talk about these things. And I moved to Minnesota and did my farming apprenticeship on a farm that was a diversified vegetable farm situated right in the middle of corn and soy land. And that's where I learned that the farmers who I had been villainizing for the last couple of years were lovely and wonderful people. If you've ever been to the Midwest, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. And I really began to understand what a perverse system we were all stuck in. I still wasn't planning on becoming a farmer. I really just wanted to have a better understanding of things. But that was in 2008, and we were in the middle of the Great Recession. And so when I came back from my apprenticeship, educated and farmed out and all versed in the nonprofit sector, I felt like I'd be able to get a job, but that did not work out. And I realized that, wow, I had this skill set and I actually had access to the 3/4 of an acre of land that I had grown up on, and maybe I should just give the farming thing a chance and kind of pull my bootstraps. I did that for a couple of years, and then I went back to grad school. I took a sabbatical from the farm and went back to grad school to earn a master's degree in urban and environmental policy and planning, so that I could, my intention in doing that was so that I could kind of get myself to a place where I could become a bridge between the work that was happening on the ground in farming and the work that was happening in rooms like this, where I felt like the on-the-ground reality was not always represented. And so I came back to the farm after finishing up my degree there, and I kind of have ever since been trying to couple this world of agriculture and farming and activism. And it's been pretty challenging. It's pretty hard to do both. It's pretty exhausting, but I'm doing my best. And some of the most recent work that I've been doing off the farm lately looks at two kind of primary issues. The first, thanks Leah, the first thing that I take spend a lot of time thinking about is gender, this guy right here, right? Gender and women's leadership in the food movement. And I'll just take a moment the second thing that I've been looking at a lot is land. I have a moment to share that at the end of this month on September 30th, Red H Farm, my farm, is going to be hosting a conference celebrating women's leadership in the food movement, the second annual conference held up in Sebastopol. And if you were inspired by Brandy a few minutes ago, which I'm guessing you were, she's going to be joining us that day. We're very excited. So there's flyers out front. There's flyers out front, and you can talk to me about it after, or you can go online and check things out. But today, considering what's at the core of this conference, this idea that sequestering carbon in the soil is the most logical way forward in the face of climate change, and considering that it's a topic that has come up in all three of these panelists so far, what I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about is this question of land. The land struggle is a global struggle, and it looks very different all over the world, but the U.S. is no exception. Farmers here in the U.S. are struggling for land justice just as people all over the world are. Recently, I contributed a chapter to a book that was published by Food First called Land Justice, Reimagining Land, Food, and the Commons in the United States. It's a really fantastic book. It's over 20 authors contributed chapters, and I highly recommend you take a look at it. It's got a lot of perspectives on people all over this country who are working on this question of land access and land justice. So I just want to take a few minutes to share a bit about the ideas from that chapter. I really have come to believe that it is of the utmost importance that we take a critical look at the relationship between the food movement, land, and this new generation of ecological farmers here in the United States. And so I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about the expectations that we have of these farmers, this idea that renting land, that young farmers can rent land, and that amounts to sufficient access to land. Our relationship to the land, both as a society and especially our expectations around how we want farmers to relate to the land, and what it means when all of those things are situated within the prevailing economic system that we're all a part of. So, that's a repeat of what I just said. All right, so farmers are really being tasked with a lot these days. Farmers are tasked with being the key environmental stewards of the land and the greater landscapes, acting as the foundation of a transformed food system. Farmers are key in creating this particular kind of cultural experience and cultural environment that many of us enjoy here in the United States. And most recently and relevantly, small-scale farmers are being looked to as the driving force and kind of the front lines in climate change mitigation. So when we're talking about carbon sequestration in the soil altogether, in many cases and in many ways, we're talking about farmers and ranchers. And the concerns that I present in the chapter and that I'm going to talk about here really focus on the fact that across the country, and particularly on the coasts, like here in the Bay Area, regions where land values are very high, the dialogue around land within the context of this new generation of ecological farmers really focuses heavily on supporting farmers and developing strong lease agreements with landowners. With that in mind, I want you to kind of consider the context of this idea of land access in the United States. There's a few points I want to make here. First, we're expecting very high input and high cost ecological farming from these growers. We want growers to be investing in the soil and growing healthy food for our families and our communities. The second thing that's important to note is that the health of the land is really like a farmer's investment portfolio. You can certainly see short-term payoffs and economic benefits to ecological farming, but the real payoff is in kind of the long game. It's in the deep, integrated, complex, rich landscapes that are built over time. Third, I'd like you to just keep in mind that renting, leasing, and borrowing in the food system is always precarious and unpredictable, and I'm not going to go into any horror stories, many of which you've probably all heard, but you can ask any farmer who's done it. It's always complicated, and it's always a little different than the expectations that are set out at the beginning. And finally, I want you to consider that this support system that we're creating within the food movement, really advocating for leases, focus on minimum 3 and hopefully 5-year leases. That's kind of the goal when you look at organizations that are really focused on helping farmers get strong leases. The dialogue sometimes then turns to this idea of long-term leases, which might be something like 20 years, which is kind of a dream for a farmer. However, if a farmer is investing something like $5,000 or $10,000 per acre in their land each year between amendments, labor, compost, things like that, the financial investment over 5 years is pretty decent. So over 20 years, it gets quite hefty. Imagine that if in year 19, that farmer then learns that their lease is not going to be renewed. And not only has that farmer lost all of the real money that they've put into that land, but they've also lost the time that they've put in, the time that has gone into building that land and building that agro-ecosystem, and they lose it without interest gained and with no kind of buyout. That's not how things work in farming when you rent, and farmers are set up to start from square one. So I know that many of us in this room, including myself, really seek to change the financial system that we are in, but the fact of the matter is that right now we are all functioning within this neoliberal capitalist regime, every one of us here. And I would suggest, and this is kind of some of the meat of it here, I would suggest that nowhere else in our financial system would we expect someone to make high cost, high risk, short-term, low return investments. So we're expecting new farmers to live in little houses and tents and converted garages, to live quintessentially bohemian lifestyles that, while they are admirable and perhaps we should all be striving for, are certainly not in step with the broader communities in which these farmers are living. And we're expecting and hoping that farmers will continue to do this for the greater good. I would suggest, in light of this, that as a community and as a social movement, that we all really need to take a step back and think about our relationship to land. And in a system based on private property, think about who should own that land, how we can turn farming into a public good or a public utility, and how we all can relate to that land in a different way. How can we create a system in which farmers not only have access, but also have ownership over the land that they steward, whether that be privately in community through utilizing community land trust models, public-private partnerships, through truly reimagining and developing a commons. A farmer colleague of mine's landlord referred to herself as a benevolent dictator. And I can tell you, knowing all the farmers that I know, that that kind of building a system on that kind of mindset is not going to work for this community. So in short, my concern is that as a movement, we're actually building a house of cards, a system that's reliant on a group of young folks that we're hoping will continue to feel satisfied living these bohemian lifestyles, not having kids, not saving for retirement, joking about the last time we went to the dentist. And many of these folks are quite educated and do have other options and could go find jobs off the farm, but are doing this work because they love it, we love it, and believe in it. As a movement, I think we need to take a good, long, hard look at what it is that we're building and whether or not we are actually reinstating some of the very structures that we seek to change in the industrial system into the food movement itself as we relate to land. The fact of the matter is the value that our society places on food is never going to justly pay for the ecological production of that food. I think we all know that. So we have to decide what we want farmers to do. Do we want farmers to produce good food efficiently so that farmers can make a living wage and pay a living wage to their workers? Do we want farmers to save the world from the pending chaos of climate change? Do we want farmers to carefully steward the land and the landscape so that we have healthy, functioning ecosystems for generations to come? If we want farmers to do all of these things, to hold up our communities and our landscapes in that way, then I think we need to collectively and concertedly figure out how exactly we're going to hold up farmers. And I'll just close by saying that this notion that Brandy reiterated, to divest to invest, is I think exactly what we have to think about.
So So I think we're out of time for questions, unfortunately, again. But I really encourage everyone to come up, and we're seated over in the middle, and come talk to these amazing speakers while they're here. And I think the next, are we having somebody else come up? Okay, breakouts. Okay. So wait, do we want to do questions then, or no? No. Okay. Okay, well, thank you so much. Let's give a huge round of applause to these amazing leaders.
Thank you. That was incredibly inspiring. I think it goes to what Stacy talked about, putting this all in context. And I love what you said about farmers holding up our world. And so it's up to us to hold up our farmers all around the world. This wraps up the plenary. We are now going into breakout sessions until 6 o'clock. So if you look in your programs, you will see all of them. The rooms, again, are along the auditorium here to this side. The library is outside beyond it, and the lobby annex is here in the back of this room. We encourage you all to continue sharing using @SoilNotOil, #SoilNotOil2017. Think about all that you've gleaned, share with those around you, recommit to being the change, and we will see you back for dinner at 6 and a keynote at 7. Thank you for being here for Soil Not Oil.